You guys ready?
Yeah.
My name is Maestro. I served in Vietnam from August of 1967 till August of 1968. I served with the United States Navy on a riverboat out of the deepwater port of Da Nang. It was a flat-bottom boat with a ramp in the front. It was a leftover landing craft left over from the Korean War. Top speed was 5 miles an hour. And our mission was to bring supplies to the troops in Hue and Dong Han, the Perfume and Qua Viet rivers. Having mines blowing up our boats, being shot at with bullets and rockets, getting hit with shrapnel, firing our weapons, throwing grenades in the river to try and blow up those mines or kill the underwater demolition teams planting them, that was the easy part. Going up and down those rivers waiting for the next attack, that was the hard part. And losing 3 of my shipmates, that was the hard part too. 2 of them were 21 and 1 was 20 years old when they were killed on that riverboat in Vietnam. Of the over 58,200 Americans killed in Vietnam, more than 50% of them were 23 years old or younger. 5 of them were 16 and 1 was 15. They lied about their age to get into the military. Be careful what you lie about. Be very, very careful what you lie about. There's no such thing as a good war. And I need to emphasize this. There is no such thing as a good war. They never happen, ever. But we live in a dangerous world because it has to be a dangerous world. And war is the ultimate danger, the ultimate challenge. There are good lessons of war. And the reason I call them good lessons of war is because far more people are living better lives than died learning those lessons. World War II, the first rockets, the first jet planes were used in war. And today rockets put our satellites into orbit and take us to the moon and beyond. And jet planes fly us all over the world in speed and comfort. During World War II, America dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. And thousands of people were killed. But today, millions of people are living better lives because the conflict forced us to think how we can harness the awesome power of the atom. Freedom is not free. It has to be held up. That's why it's so hard. You can't just let it fall and it's just going to be there for you. You have to work at it. You have to hold it up. You have to make it. You have to sacrifice for it. And that's why it's so hard. That's why it's not free. During World War I, if you had a family member serving in that war, you would put a blue star in the front window of your home, and it was a great honor in those days to serve our country. And that blue star in the front window of that home or on a white flag in front of that house showed honor and respect for the servicemen overseas fighting for America. If that serviceman was wounded, the blue star is changed to a silver star. If that serviceman was killed, the blue star was changed to a gold star. And that's what started Gold Star families, Gold Star wives, Gold Star mothers. The last Sunday in September is a national holiday. It's called Gold Star Mother's Day. It's a national holiday. It's the best kept secret in America. It's a day to thank the Gold Star families for their sacrifice. They miss their loved ones every single day. And the last Sunday in September was supposed to just thank them for their sacrifice, in the hope that if America felt part of their pain, they might feel just a little bit better. And it's the best kept secret in America. And every year I go to the media and I say, could you guys just say thank you to these families on their day? Could you just say thank you? And they say, yeah, we will, we will. You guys, who's heard of Gold Star Mother's Day? Could you raise your hand? One. Who's heard of Groundhog Day? Big difference, huh? So I say to the media, listen, just give them half as much as you give the groundhogs. Just half as much. Could you do that? Because that would be more than enough. And the media keeps saying, yeah, we will. And they don't. And now you know why I don't care for our illustrious media. They're not American patriots. They're afraid to stand up for God and our country. Please remember the Blue, Silver, and Gold Star families and the sacrifice they make. And the Gold Star mothers, they're the mothers of America's freedom. Please remember them. As a speaker at schools around the country, one of the questions I'm asked is, how many people did you kill? And it needs to have the proper answer. The truth is, most of us combat veterans, we really don't know how many we kill. We really don't know. We're dropping bombs from planes, shooting missiles and salvos from naval gunships, firing from artillery batteries, firing from tanks, even firing our hand weapons. I was on my riverboat, and I'm firing my machine gun, and all I'm counting was my breaths. Please, God, give me 10 more breaths, and then I'd start again. That's all I was counting. What did I have to do this second to stay alive the next second? If a veteran has a number of how many he has killed, in most cases he will not share that number with you, because that's the price of freedom that he must carry. And giving you a number doesn't make that burden any lighter. And if his number's higher than another's, doesn't make him a better fighter. It only means his opportunities were different. We were trained to survive. We were trained to bring as much force, as much firepower to the battlefield as we could, in the hope that our enemy would choose to surrender. Killing was only supposed to be done when absolutely necessary. It was never to become a sport. But in Vietnam, it was different. Our leaders wanted us to give them a body count. They thought that by telling the American people how many of our enemy were being killed, they could show how we were winning the war. And those of us on the battlefield knew it was not a measure of winning or losing. It was not a measure at all. So we figured if it was numbers they wanted, it was numbers they were going to get. So we inflated the numbers to them. And they called us on it. We don't believe you. You need to confirm your kills. So a few of our troops gave their officers severed heads and bags full of ears and said, here, they're confirmed. You count them. Today in Afghanistan and Iraq, you don't hear a running total of how many of our enemy are being killed. You don't hear a running total. Because America's military doesn't do body counts anymore. Because it's not a measure of winning or losing. Not a measure at all. Every man and woman who has ever worn the uniform of America's armed forces, we have never failed in our number one mission. And that is to preserve the freedom and way of life of all America. And we have never failed in that mission. So don't think of us by how many we kill. Please, instead, think of us by how many we save. Because collectively, we all help save you. And that is what we really do. That is what counts. Over 58,200 Americans killed in Vietnam. And over 6,000 in Afghanistan and Iraq, and thousands more in World War II and World War I, and all the wars that have kept America free. And every single one of them who have died for this country were right. They were absolutely right. You are worth dying for. You are that important, that valuable. As human beings, as citizens, as Americans, you are worth dying for. And how do you pay them back? Those men and women who have died for you. How do you pay them back? You work for and earn and get the best education you can. That's the payback. Not only for them, but for yourself. You guys see the war movies? I know you do, right? You see war movies. Saving Private Ryan, HBO's Band of Brothers, Black Hawk Down. You've seen the war movies, right? You can say yes, it's okay. What the war movies are 5% of what war really is. You're only getting 5%. That's it, 5%. You're missing 95% of it. You don't get the smell in the movies. The smell alone will make you sick. There's no director telling you how long you have to look at a body or a body part. In the movies, maybe you'll get 1 second. In war, you get all the time you need. Burn those images in your mind forever. And they never, ever go away. You don't get to pick shrapnel from your arms or your body. You don't get your eardrums blown out. You don't get to feel the blood drying in your hands in the movies. You don't get to feel the fear. The horrific fear of what it's like to have someone trying to kill you. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Or you them. There is no honor in taking the life of another human being. There is no honor in it. It changes you and twists you and knots you and rips you up inside in ways you cannot even imagine. And you don't get that in the movies. And you will never go to war and 2 or 3 hours later get up from the theater and go home. So the next time you go and you see a war movie, understand you're only getting 5% of what war really is. I want to talk to you now about the children of war and how their lives are affected when a country hosts a war. When we arrived in Vietnam, we were fighting a people who never knew what peace was. They were born and raised with war all around them. They weren't born and raised while America was there. They were born and raised fighting the French. And before the French, they were fighting the Japanese. And before the Japanese, they were fighting the French again. And before the French, they were fighting the Chinese. They were born and raised with war all around them. It was normal to have their friends go missing, or their neighbors, or their family members, or their homes destroyed. They saw death and destruction as often as you guys go to the store. A child in Vietnam had to learn to make and set a booby trap so they knew how not to step in one. It was common to see 8, 9, 10-year-old boys at the entrances to our bases, laughing with us, joking with us, begging for food. But what they were doing was reconnaissance. They were counting how many soldiers went in and out. How many tanks were in the base? What direction did the patrol go in? What bunker in the base was the ammo dump? How far was that ammo dump from the tree line so they could bomb it? 8, 9, 10-year-olds doing reconnaissance, digging tunnels, carrying supplies. A 12, 13, 14-year-old could put 100, 200 pounds of supplies on a bicycle and push that bicycle miles through the jungle. We fought 2.5 armies in Vietnam. We fought 2.5 separate and distinct armies in Vietnam. The first army we fought was the North Vietnamese Regular Army. They were a uniformed army. They came down from the north along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and 90% of the fighting was between these conventional armies. The second army we fought were the Viet Cong. They were South Vietnamese people, civilians by day and night, guerrilla warfare fighters by day and night. And the half a army we fought were the people that supported them, so you never knew who your enemy really was. The Viet Cong would go into a village in South Vietnam, gather up all the villagers to the village square. Take the village leaders, cut their heads off, put their heads on a pole in the middle of the village and say, if you don't do what we say, your head can go on the pole next. And it did not matter how old you were. And the Viet Cong would say to the people, we need food and supplies. We need tunnels dug. We need booby traps built and set. We need guerrilla warfare fighters. And a lot of that work was done by children. There were some 10-year-old guerrilla warfare fighters. They were the worst. They could kill you in a heartbeat. And they thought it was fun. The Viet Cong would take a 2, 3, 4-year-old little girl, put an explosive device in her arms, disguise it as a loaf of bread or a bouquet of flowers or a basket of food, and send her at us. You want to see your mommy? All you have to do is take this package to those men over there. And we had to shoot because we didn't want to die. And we had to shoot because we knew if we showed this enemy a weakness in our defense, they would exploit that weakness. And they would send a whole lot more children. And you could not die with that child because you had pledged your allegiance to each other, that you would do everything you could to keep each other alive. But there wasn't much left of that little girl. So the Viet Cong would take another little girl and just put a loaf of bread or a bouquet of flowers or a basket of food in her arms and send her at us. And now they had a picture of a dead baby. They could show the world how we were baby killers, how we killed children bearing gifts. And these children were taken from the parents of the South Vietnamese people who were working and fighting and telling their friends and neighbors that the South must stay free, that America will help us. What would you have done to keep your children safe? What would you have said? Would you have continued to fight for your freedom even after your child was lost? What would you have done? How do you fight a war when a 3-year-old can kill you? How do you train to fight children? Can you answer any one of these questions? Can you? No response? Nobody? What would you have done to keep your children safe? Come on, what would you have done? Nothing? Not a response? Nothing? Tough questions, aren't they? Do you feel any relief at all? You really don't have to answer them? You really don't have to answer them, right? You can sit there. You don't have to answer that. Not going to say anything. Even though I don't have an answer, I'm not going to say anything. You want to know the answer? I'm giving you the answer right now. God bless our troops. God bless our troops. That's not the only way children died in Vietnam. A soldier would pick a crying baby up from its cradle and the cradle would explode. And because it was a guerrilla war, armies fought wherever they happened to meet, and sometimes children were caught in the crossfire. And children were killed by the bombing. More bombs were dropped in Vietnam than all of World War II. And Ho Chi Minh would look over the battlefield and see he was losing every single battle. His armies were being decimated. Ho Chi Minh was the leader of our enemy from the north. His armies were being decimated. And America's military would say, this guy's got to give up. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing this. He has to give up. But Ho Chi Minh would be looking at the divide in America with racism and the war in Vietnam dividing our country farther and farther apart. And he knew that rather than sacrifice thousands more of his people, he could send a few children to do the job better. Because that fed the anti-war protesters and divided our country farther and farther apart. And America's military, he was this close to giving up. He was this close to surrendering. But it wasn't the American military that lost that war, it was our illustrious elected officials. It was our illustrious elected officials who threw in that towel. We could have left Vietnam a free nation. But we haven't learned that lesson because we're still electing these illustrious elected officials. I don't know what anybody's thinking. We're still electing them. I was asked to join Vietnam Veterans Against the War when I came home. And I could not join that organization because I believed I'd be going against the troops. So I could not join Vietnam Veterans Against the War because I believed that. So one day I got this stupid and naive idea that I was going to go to an anti-war demonstration and I was going to cheer for the troops. I really thought I was going to make a difference. I really did. And as I arrived near the protest, I was watching the protesters walking, and I was walking with them, and I looked up and I noticed one of the protesters was carrying a picture of a dead Vietnamese child. And my anger got the best of me, and I tried to grab that picture and rip it up, and I was immediately surrounded. I was chastised and spit on and screamed at, and I'll admit I didn't ask them in a very nice way. The shouting quickly escalated to screaming and rage, and I realized that someone could die here, and I knew it wouldn't be me. In that same instant, I realized that there was nothing here worth dying over. So I raised my hands and I walked away. Never even made it to the protest, just walked away. I backed away. Under jeers and screaming, coward and chicken and everything that you could call. And I left angry and upset that I did not have the patience or the words to convince them. Is there anyone here who does not understand how children were used in this war? Please let me know now. Because I do not want to miss even one of you. Not even one of you. a little Vietnamese girl just got to take a breath. Because she was your teacher. I was just a messenger. The war ended in Vietnam in 1975. And America's military was scooping up all the orphans and all the children they could to bring them home to America. And some Vietnamese mothers were pushing their babies onto the helicopters and planes, leaving, begging, pleading to take their children out of communism and raise them in freedom, knowing that they may never see that child again. And some Vietnamese parents were killing themselves in order for their children to be orphaned so they could be taken to America and raised in freedom. You see, when you have your freedom and you lost it, boy, you get it. You really know what you've lost. Each and every one of you, you already have your freedom. You already have it. It's already yours. Do you really know what you've got? Do you really know? Or must you lose it before you find out? How will you learn? Today, as I'm speaking to you, today there are children being born and raised with war all around them, right now. There are children being forced into hard labor around the world. There are children being sold into slavery. There are children being forced into prostitution all around the world, right now, as it's going on right now. Hasn't changed. The Vietnam War ended in 1975, and since the ending of the war, approximately 100,000 Vietnamese have been killed or maimed. And a lot of them are children. As their population expands into the countryside, children play where adults don't normally go, and they step on long-forgotten landmines or booby traps, or pick up unexploded ordnance. You see, when a country hosts a war, it never ends for them when the fighting stops. And it's always, always, always the children who suffer the most. It's always them. Say a prayer for these children of war. Say a prayer for them. And say a prayer of gratitude for you, for what you have. The children of war. The children of war. A tour in Vietnam was for 1 year. Unless you were in the Marine Corps or the Marines, that was a 13-month tour. When you finished your tour, and you got to come home, you were met at the military bases and at the airports in America by people spitting in your face, throwing rotten fruit at you. We have a present for you, as we were handed bags full of dog crap. We go into a bar for a little beer and a little fellowship and get thrown out of the bar because they don't serve baby killers. We'd go for a job and know that if we even wanted to get the interview, we had to leave the military portion of our application blank. And we ask a young lady on a date, arrive at her home to pick her up, to find her parents standing in the doorway. You're not dating our daughter. Now, this was not being done by all Americans. As a matter of fact, it was being done by very few Americans. But it's a classic example of what happens when good people do nothing. When you see injustice and you see indifference and you don't do anything, you allow it to continue. You enable it to happen. And because of the way Vietnam veterans were treated when we came home, we started flying a black POW MIA flag. Prisoners of war missing in action. And that flag flies to remind all Americans that we will not turn our backs on the men and women who protect us. That we will do everything we can to bring them home, no matter how small the part. And that we will never, ever forget them. Because never again will a defender of America ever come home to an ungrateful country. Never, ever again. There were two platforms of protest during the Vietnam War. There were two separate and distinct platforms of protest during the Vietnam War. One of the platforms of protest where black people wanted to be treated equally. They wanted the same rights and opportunities as everybody else. And that was a good, strong, solid platform to stand on. As strong then as it is today for anyone. God chooses the color of our skin. God chooses if we are a man or a woman. God chooses our parents and our brothers and our sisters. And God chooses the nation we are born in. And we chastise and bully and ridicule and judge people for the choices God has made. The color of our souls is the color of water. And we choose to muddy our own souls with hate and prejudice and injustice and indifference. We choose to muddy our own souls. And that reflects on the character of who we have chosen to be. When will we start judging people by the color and the character of our souls? The other platform of protest were people protesting the Vietnam War. And they were asked, why are you protesting this war? Why are you protesting this war? And they said, because we want to see our boys come home. They said, well, when they come home, you spit in their face. Is that your way of saying, gee, we're really glad to see you? A little shaky on that platform, isn't it? Just a little bit. You're supposed to protest in this country. It's what makes us great. But do your homework and understand the platform you're going to stand on. If it's weak and shaky, you will look weak and shaky. You can protest war. You can protest war all you want. But understand this, and understand this well. All your demonstrations, all your signs, all your words will not stop the bullet from the person who wants to kill you. In March of 1968, in a rocket attack on my riverboat, a piece of steel sliced a 6-inch hole in my leg, right to my leg bone. I was sitting there looking at my leg bone and I'm going, whoa, I'm hurt. I mean, how often do you get to see your own leg bone? 6-inch hole looking in my leg. I'm going, whoa, I'm hurt, I'm hurt. And I get to the field hospital in Vietnam and one look around the tent and I wasn't hurt at all. I felt ashamed to even be there. You should have seen the other guys. When you arrived at a field hospital in Vietnam, you were put into one of 3 categories. Category 1, your wounds were so severe that you could not be helped, and you were left on the side to bleed out and die. Category 2, your wounds were severe, and if they can work on you right away, they could maybe save your life. And Category 3, your wounds were not severe enough to warrant immediate attention, and you can wait. Can you imagine making those calls as a doctor or a nurse, a corpsman, a medic? If I work on this guy, but what about that guy? What about it? Who do I get? Who could I save? Who could I save? Can you imagine making those calls? I was medevaced by helicopter to the hospital ship USS Repose, and because I was not hurt badly, I was given the job of feeding the men who had been paralyzed. And that was a hard job to do because some of those guys just wanted to die. They couldn't see how the rest of their life could be without the use of their arms or their legs or both. And I had to try and convince them that as long as they were still alive, they could find their purpose. Just like you guys are preparing yourselves to go find your purpose or be prepared when your purpose finds you. But there was one Marine that I was so honored and so proud to have fed. He had been hit in his lower back by a mortar and his legs were completely paralyzed and in shreds. And his arms were partially paralyzed. And you can see him lying in his bed, desperately trying to gain control of his arms so he could put his hands together. He just wanted to go like this. And then when he got his hands together, he was going to clap his hands, and then he was going to get on with his life. He was never, ever going to give up, no matter what. He was never, ever going to give up. Do you understand the kind of courage that Marine is showing you? Do you get that kind of courage? Each and every one of you, you have that kind of courage within you. Find your courage. Find your courage. Finding your courage is knowing right from wrong and saying no to the wrong. That's finding your courage. Finding your courage is owning and admitting your mistakes. Finding your courage is wondering just how good your best really is. Don't you guys want to know how good you are? Don't you even want to know? And when you get up to do your best, you're going to get knocked down. And finding your courage is getting back up and getting back up for the rest of your life. You get back up. And if you learn all you can, take this education that you are personally responsible for and combine it with your courage, that is how you create the wisdom to make good things happen for yourself and the world around you. And when you're having a bad day, and you will have bad days, and you can take a breath, and you can put your hands together, remember that Marine and all the men and women who have died for you. Find your courage. Learn all you can. Create your wisdom. I've been trying to do today is to try and give you an inkling, just an inkling, of how much your freedom cost. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how much your freedom cost. How precious it is, how beautiful it is, how wonderful it is. And who will you give your freedom to? Who will you give your freedom to? Okay, I'll wait. You got 15 minutes? Okay. Who will you give your freedom to? Free to give it away. Who will you give it to? Drugs? Your kids? You want theirs to have their own. You don't want to give yours away. You want theirs to have their own. See the difference? Here's the choices on who you can give your freedom to. Your personal freedom is yours. You can give it to drugs. You can give it to alcohol. You can give it to tobacco. You can give it to having a baby too young. You can give it to jail. You can give it to socialism. You can let somebody else decide for you. Or you can keep it for yourself. And I'm asking you to please consider keeping it for yourself. Please consider keeping it for yourself. We fought so hard. We sacrificed so much. Please consider keeping your freedom for yourself. I want to talk to you about the greatest war. If you haven't been listening to me, please listen to this part. The greatest war has been since mankind first appeared on the earth, and it will be the greatest war until the last human being perishes from the planet. So if you haven't been listening to me, just listen to this part, because I want to explain to you the greatest war in the hope that maybe you could fight it better. We are living in an absolutely perfect world. We are living in an absolutely perfect world. The earth is turning approximately 1,000 miles an hour in its relationship to the sun, so that all of the earth can get the benefit of the sun's life-giving rays. In the center of the earth is a solid ball of iron and nickel, and it's turning slower than the earth is turning, just slow enough to create enough friction to keep the lava it floats in hot, and all the volcanoes are the pressure relief points. And this ball is Earth's generator. It generates the magnetic field that protects us from the solar storm of the sun. The particles coming off the sun would bombard the earth, and there could not be life on it as we know it. And this magnetic field catches these particles and forces them around the sun, protecting us from that solar storm. And this magnetic field also gives us our sense of direction, points our compasses north. The perfect tilt on Earth's axis of 23.5 degrees gives us our 4 seasons. And the moon holds the earth from wobbling off its axis and controls our tides. And the earth is the perfect distance from the sun with the perfect atmosphere, maintaining the perfect temperature range. And all the planets are in a perfectly flat line in their orbit around the sun, keeping their orbit and Earth's orbit in absolutely perfect balance. And all the plants and all the animals, the air, the water, the design of our bodies, all of this was done for us. If you think there's no God, please think again. What makes us perfect as human beings, what makes us absolutely perfect as human beings, are our differences. If we were all the same, we would have died of boredom long ago. What makes us absolutely perfect are our differences. The greatest war human beings will always fight, will forever fight, is to accept and honor and respect our differences and to learn to work together in spite of them. We live in a dangerous world, and it has to be a dangerous world. It will always be a dangerous world because it's the danger, it's the conflict, it's the challenges that forces human beings to think. It's the dangerous world that will test your resolve and force you to find your courage. It's the dangerous world that will define who you really are. This is the greatest war. It will never change. It will never go away. And if you understand it, maybe, just maybe, you could fight it better. I just want to touch on some of the great lessons from World War II that are very important to you. One of the great lessons of World War II was you could not kill a race of people because of their religion or the color of their skin or for any reason. It was called the Holocaust. But the world didn't learn that lesson, and genocide has happened again and again and again and again. When will the world get that one? When will we learn that lesson? Another great lesson from World War II, America believed that we could be a nation unto ourselves. The oceans would protect us, and we could be a nation unto ourselves, and what happened in the rest of the world wouldn't matter. And we watched as Germany and Japan grew bigger and stronger and more powerful. And the attack on Pearl Harbor woke us up. And we realized that we could no longer remain isolated from the world. We had to embrace the world. And the ongoing question for you for the rest of your life will be, how does America embrace the world? How do we do that? And that question will never go away, because we cannot let go. We cannot retreat into a nation unto ourselves again, because we cannot have a war on this land. Because I do not want my children or my grandchildren to become children of war, any more than I want any child in America to become a child of war. So how do we embrace the world? I want to thank you all for listening. Please find your courage. Please keep your freedom for yourself. Please consider it. Learn all you can. Be an American patriot, and God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you.